Hi there. In this section, you are going to learn about trigonometric and inverse trigonometric functions. You will also learn the properties about trigonometric and inverse trigonometric functions. So let's begin. Functions sine and sine inverse. As you can see, I have x-axis which is over here, and this is my y-axis. This is my origin, so this is 0. On the right side of 0, I have coordinates pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi, and on the left hand side I have negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 over 2 pi and negative 2 pi. And this is my value on the y-axis, which is 1 and negative 1. Let's grab the function sine. So this is the graph of my sine x. As you can see, the value of sine increases from 0 to pi over 2, and the maximum value of sine is 1, and then it decreases from pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2, and the minimum value of sine is negative 1. We can consider all the values on the x-axis for which the sine is defined. So technically, what we can say that the domain of function sine is real number, which means all the values from negative infinity to positive infinity, and the range of the sine is negative 1 to 1, because the minimum value of sine is negative 1 and the maximum value of sine is 1. Periodicity of sine is 2 pi because sine repeats itself after 2 pi. So basically it's more like a rotating in a cycle, and you get the same point after 2 pi, or you can say after one rotation. Now let's talk about some more properties of sine. So as you can see, this is my quadrant. So this is my first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant and fourth quadrant. The value goes from here is 0 all the way to pi over 2. From here to here is pi over 2 to pi. From here to here is pi to 3 pi over 2. And from here 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi. Sine is positive in first quadrant, and the value of the sine moves from 0 to 1. Sine is positive in second quadrant too, and the value of the sine moves from 1 to 0. Sine is negative in third quadrant, and the value changes from 0 to negative 1, which is right here. And sine is also negative in fourth quadrant, and the value changes from negative 1 to 0, which is right here. In this slide, let's talk about the sine inverse function. So this is my x-axis, and as you can see, this is my negative 1 and this is 1. Over the x-axis I have positive y, and the values are pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi, and the values below the x-axis is negative pi over 2, negative pi, negative 3 over 2 pi and negative 2 pi. So let's graph the function sine inverse x. And if we graph the sine inverse x, this will be the function sine inverse x. If you look closely, what you will see, if we change x into y and y into x, then x-axis will convert into y-axis, and then you can get exactly the same kind of curve that we got when we graph sine x. But this is the function sine inverse x. So the value of sine lies between negative 1 and 1, but you can consider all the values on the y-axis from negative infinity to positive infinity. I'm considering one point over here. This point corresponds to 1 on the x-axis and pi over 2 on the y-axis, and this is my second point. This corresponds to negative 1 on the x-axis and negative pi over 2 on the y-axis. The domain of this function is from negative 1 to 1, and the range of this function is negative pi over 2 right here to pi over 2 right here. If we consider the branch of sine inverse x from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, technically this colored part with the red ink, then this part is known as principal value branch, where you can see the minimum value is negative 1 and the maximum value is 1, and the range is from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2.